for being here. I tend to write a lot about time as I get older, and I've been thinking particularly about the accompanying dilution and concentration that comes with time. So the opening poem is called Homeopathy of Memory. Smaller and smaller doses to force the bloom. Once a full half cup, then a generous dropperful. Later still, one carefully measured drop. Now merely a fleeting brush of daylight, a word rhyming with itself, a note suspended on a wire of cord, how the screened-in porch breathed its flowers into us after a rain. Maybe you remember the New Yorker article about how we're all going to fall into the ocean. This one is called Fault Lines. If there's a deep, unstable seam running the length of this broad valley, I'm unmoved. If warning waves are there, I'm not aware. The only compression I can feel is a slight ticking in the chest, natural with age. Together, we pretend this plate of hardened soil with its tight weave of trees and grasses, hugged by low hills, zipped into its grid of highways and bridges, is firm, eternal. Insects etch their signatures, a pulse beyond the temperature of human skin. It's over generations we leave prints and map this land into our history. Why sit on the beach imagining the sneaker wave? Why drive the coast road rehearsing for the landslide? Must there be a shadowy intruder glimpsed beyond the mirrored dark? Boy Who Cried Wolf was my childhood nightmare, that it could be your own fault. A lot of these are kind of dark. It's winter, and this is a rather grim winter poem. It's called Evicting the Lodger. You moved into the back bedroom one late November, unpacked your heavy leather suitcase, filled all the closets with your shoes and coats, the dresser with your muted darks and fraying hems, lined up your unguents and instruments along the shelf above the sink in our shared bathroom, left your smudges on the toothbrush glass. Every evening, I'd find you in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, naming everything so wrong, the cupboards misaligned, the menu ill-conceived, the pepper far too peppery, the radio too shrill. And every morning, neatly folded alongside my plate, I'd find your list of all the many things I should be worrying about. In the deepest drifts of winter, you climbed into my bed and shoved your icy feet between my thighs, insisting, "Warm me." But I was already frozen, so we lay that way for hours under the useless blankets, your chattering accompanying my broken dreams like broken teeth rattling in a jar. I'm terribly disturbed by your thickening nails, your mottled skin, how your cheeks make wrinkled pouches underneath your eyes. This is not like watching my mother grow thin and distant, her liquid gaze, her hesitant smile. I loved those lines that stitched her mouth into a different way of being. She's gone, and you're still here. You have to go. This one has an epigraph from Mark Doty. The epigraph is, "Do we love more what we can't say?" While my eyes are looking at architecture and my ears are sampling drips of voice, this other thing has cunningly escaped the frame, slipped silent into a thin white margin, negative space, a second frame, into which no story might be poured. I can feel its heavy drag deep in my chest, like the moment the acupuncturist needle enters a dense current and the body echoes back. And I'm wondering, do I love this more for the way it beckons and then denies me? Some bird I cannot see and cannot name is singing her heart out, and I'm seduced by what I can't transcribe in any lexicon or syntax that I know, even as I can't help listening in palimpsest, glossing her chuckling syllables, hominy, hominy, hominy grits. Like naming this thing we're watching dawn, calling this thing we're feeling wonder, scanning for images, hauling in our dripping nets. I'm at a loss. I've misconstrued. And do I love this more? I do. It seems that the trees themselves are singing back and forth. I have a couple of friends who run a kind of a Zen meditation center, but the way they make their money is going in and basically settling estates as liquidators. And after their latest visit to my house, I wrote this poem called The State of My Estate. I say let them come, the liquidators, tunneling unceremoniously through the slag heap of accumulated years. I say come, intrepid cleanup crew, dig your spades into the rich mulch mounded round the roots of my family tree. Help yourself to the precious treasures boxed up unsorted along the back wall of my garage. It's all there. Everything that funneled my way on the flood of each successive loss, standing in place of, holding an echo or a glimpse of, like the unopened book I will never reread but must leave on the shelf. Snags and silt piling up, narrowing the stream for decades, and the children, bless their hearts, want little part of it, memories already stretched to breaking. What do you enjoy most about it? I ask the liquidator. Oh, the mining, he replies. When the fiduciary says there's a stash of gold coins in there somewhere, and we go sifting through the underwear drawers and the baskets of TV remotes until suddenly, eureka, because it's mostly just days and days of sorting, pricing, but then there are those eureka moments. Not this estate. Not enough to merit the fiduciary, the liquidator. I don't think you'll find any eurekas here. It'll be mostly what you've come to expect, the seemingly indisposable now destined to disappear. A grandmother's daybook, a father's army discharge, papers, poem drafts, and of course shoeboxes bursting with the living faces of the anonymous dead. The title of this one is Cryosphere, so think of cryogenics, or cryo, the Greek word for frost. Could also cry. Go far enough north, the tears freeze on your cheeks, chiseled diamonds dropping into the mounded banks. Snow that's drifting innocent as an afterthought suddenly lets fall its blinding counterweight into my mother's perpetual dream of wintering. See her crossing the frost field, cheeks burned leather red. Her north is folded over along its longitudes. In her sharply pleated book of seasons, every so often a silver thaw strikes its high note, holds every breath in suspension, leaves her awestruck. As I am, so desperately wanting to follow her vanishing into that frozen mausoleum. She needed her dreamed-of Arctic fixed, solid as a compass bearing, not drifting north another 15 meters every year. Now in her footsteps, I've taken to the angles, the pains, the star-sharp valences, utter brilliance of a single thought in a mind stretched flat to its gently curved horizon. I've drawn a perfect circle around the very moment she disappeared from view. The study of true sense. We all come from someplace else, and meaning migrates with us. That's what we pack into our battered suitcases and what we leave behind on shelves or in cardboard boxes at the curb. Certain themes coming. A guy in Colorado was just arrested for littering the highway with books. He felt burdened by a library he didn't know any other way to get rid of. They caught him speeding down US 287, casting volumes to the wind. We take comfort in etymologies, more willing to adopt the word whose provenance we've verified. If we take in strays, we bind them promptly to a strong branch of the family tree, hoping the graft will take. Our friends are paying to test their DNA for ancestry, ethnicity. They're thrilled, discovering third cousins, a sense of where they came from, who they are. Everyone wants to play a title role in someone's fiction. With every generation, whole households go missing. You may try to trace the trajectory of what a family means through some tarnished silver, a few undated letters, photos in a shoebox. But it all comes down to which few words you chose to carry with you from the burning building. Now you get to make a sentence from these. The rest is ash. I'm putting together a chapbook of poems about punctuation. And I was going to read the one called Dash, but it actually works better on the page, so I'm not going to read it, but you can picture it. It really needs to be visual. But this one is called Comma, and it actually emerged from, remember the big ice storm we had a couple winters ago? And I lived near some big trees. Comma. Over and over through the early hours of that sub-zero night, swaddling the young olive tree in towels pulled hot from the dryer, each time the melt, the drip, the freeze again, and how we then needed, oh so gingerly, to separate terry cloth from each thin ice-coated leaf, until we finally gave over and went to bed past midnight, not knowing what would survive. Once on the shores of Waskesiu Lake, my mother throwing a stick over and over for Casey to swim out and fetch back to her, shaking his glee all over the both of them, and me recalling how she looked so perfectly herself in that moment when I took the photo that is all I still have of that day, and how when the sun was setting orange as a forest fire behind the pines, we were both still trusting summer. Today I'm pondering the inconclusiveness of breathing, willed yet involuntary, as every body somehow intrinsically refuses its full stop, marveling at how I do keep breathing in and out through sleep and inattention, though every cell and synapse would embrace the comma, moment of gentlest abandon to not being. When I go tired of me, I'm missing you. I have two poems about losing my mind. I keep rewriting them over and over. I keep forgetting that I've written them. This one is called Aphasia. Ghosts of syllables sluice in. I'm grasping for purchase, one word at a time. Listening fingers slipping on a rounded edge. I'm aching for the clarity of birdsong, trebles, blooms. Even just to let it all drain out, be left blessedly untroubled by seepages. But I'm struggling to come to terms with dissolving accretions, willing to abandon morsels, deft, incisive, the well-punctuated phrase too painfully labored over. Why still so enamored of the line break? What is so precious about a proper name? More to the point, what century is this? The heavy furniture exhales the vapors of curtained conversations I can't quite hear, echoes of families I once lived on the outskirts of. In that childhood, a grandmother knew how to coddle eggs. Wit was universally admired. Books were mappable places, vast territories visited and claimed and named and owned. Now in this current century, the table is set for a meal I haven't planned. Floral centerpiece, napkins intricately folded into birds, but the knives are all dull, and I can't remember which side the fork goes on. I'm not going to read you the other one about losing my mind. I just changed my mind. I'm just going to read 3 more. Last summer, I spent several weeks on a writing retreat very far north in Vermont. And during the summer, the Department of Homeland Security had put out a whole bunch of new guidelines, and the state was overrun with people patrolling the border all the way to basically the south of the state. This is called Boundary. 20 miles to the north, A dark line casts its sharp shadow across grass, bisects the highway, cuts through trees and streams. It's drawn with an empty pen on transparent air, and we can't perceive either line or shadow, yet do feel some trembling in the atmosphere as forests, fields, and Lake McPherson continue to breathe with a single lung. One pictures how the surgeon in his mind will mark the skin with a dotted line before picking up the scalpel, how the dressmaker uses that little handled wheel to transfer faint pattern lines onto the cloth before the final cut. All those anticipatory lines, like but unlike this one. For isn't this line utterly illogical and irrelevant to the pastures and the forest and Lake McPherson, where 7 ultramarathon swimmers Wednesday made the distance lengthwise from Newport, Vermont to Magog, Quebec, their swim dedicated to the asylum seekers. 25 miles of breaststroke, crawl, and butterfly, honoring a peaceful and compassionate crossing of borders. While back on dry land, along the highways and country roads from bunkers and beachheads within a 100-mile zone of authorized enforcement, they're stopping cars demanding proof of belonging, because they have a picture of what belonging looks like and what it doesn't. Because they're mustering in defense of that imaginary line we've been told we must believe in, even though we can see that the air is drifting freely back and forth, the birds finding no fracture in the winds they ride, and the fish know only one deep, familiar world of lake. And then, so as not to leave us in too much grim of a place, 2 little poems of consolation and contentment. First one is called Sweet Collusion. Together we translate our mornings into coffee and the crossword, each with her own cup, each her own copy, the ritual habitual. Afternoons into separate rooms, you pondering interstellar space while I'm deep into the intergalactic. It's true, we do find ourselves from time to time nibbling together at the crusty edges of some delectable morsel, and we're often sending telegraphic winks across the kitchen island, but we're just as often flung into opposing orbits, galvanized by our own magnetic fields. These more than 20 years living in parallel, once I might have wished them otherwise, but now I swear I can't stop marveling at our unfailingly crossing paths, our moments of celestial alignment, and how the view from here is infinitely forgiving. And then I'll just close with this. I spent some time in Cannon, Georgia, C-A-N-O-N, Georgia. And this is called Visiting the Stones in Cannon, Georgia. Before I leave this town, I'll make my customary pilgrimage to wander among the local dead. I like this way of reading a place's past, like the quiet. I'll seek out one neglected headstone, clear away some thistles, note the time span, quick calculations, and perhaps a fingernail of Bible verse in carved italic script. Some Confederate whiskey voice may come belling forth his family name in granite capitals, perhaps the very name of the street behind the one I'm staying on, and in relief, a kneeling angel, or 2 slender hands lifted and pressed in prayer. This will be someone else's loss I'm looking into, another person's place of grieving and remembrance, if anyone is still alive to grieve in this tightly shuttered town. For me, it's simpler, just a page to read, a plot to tend in my brief passage. Why do I do this? Because this is where the living go.